In Chapter 14, we're going to talk about data collection, testing, and observation. So when we move on into the initial preparation for data collection, what we're needing are those things that we need to do first. And we've already discussed the importance of IRB approval and making sure that we have the right measurements when we do our studies, making sure that our raters are trained, and putting together the structure of our study, whether that would be assembling forms, test packets, or setting up education, all those factors that we include when we do our research. So we need to be very well prepared. So when we're looking at our measures, of course, looking back to what we've already talked about, reliability is such a key factor in making sure that you have a very viable study. So we need to make sure that those tools that are being used are reliable, and that the reliability has been within those acceptable limits that we're looking for to make sure that we're using the right tool. And was it also used in similar populations? And this is really important because sometimes a test that is reliable in a certain population may not transfer to another population. So again, it's when you're evaluating those tools, there are so many things to really think about, those nuances, whether it's appropriate. And sometimes it's things as simple as how they're worded, and depending on whether possibly English is the second language, those types of things, it may be that the way things are written in a particular survey or test may not be appropriate for one population when it was very appropriate for another. So think on those terms and think very critically when you're looking at the factors in studies and when you're doing your critiques as well. So when we're looking at validity, we need to think about the same types of things. Really making sure that it's appropriate for our study, making sure that it has been proven to be a valid tool or test, and really focusing on if it's appropriate for a particular population. And one thing that I do want to key into is our health literacy and our reading levels and what the difficulty of a particular test or survey may be. And it may, again, looking at particular populations, college graduates may be very different from those who haven't graduated from high school in understanding and comprehending and answering specifically to a question. So when we're looking at our raters as well, we want to make sure that they're well trained, so they're very consistent, and that's something that's really important too, because again, we want that consistency. We want everything to be consistent so everyone is treated the same way, so that all the raters actually rate in the same way, because we all have our different perspectives, and even just little nuances of how a rater may pose a question or how they may interpret an answer may actually skew some of the results of your study. So all those things are really critical, and making sure that they hold, if they're applying, like explaining the informed consent or any of those other components of a particular study, that they are holding to a very high ethical standard as well. So keep all those types of things in mind. And as we're moving on, we're going to look at observation. What is the data collection? And usually the first data collection is really just kind of looking at things, and observations may be really structured, or that may just be unstructured, but always be very systematic and very purposeful as you're observing what occurs. And again, observation is important, how things play out for a particular study, because that's something that is discussed in the section of your study where you're relating back to maybe there's some things that could have possibly been done different during the study that may have made the outcome better. So always be very astute and alert and watch every detail of a particular study. And the same holds true when you're critiquing studies, to really read into the whole picture, not just what's on the paper, but maybe what's not even on the paper, and ask those critical questions. So when we're reading research, we need to look at it with a very critical eye and an educated eye to really know if indeed what we're looking at is the best evidence. So keep that in mind. Always question. So when we're looking at our observations, we're looking at a number of different things. It may be time and data, physical space, people who are present, actions, interactions. All those factors come into play that create the environment for the particular study, and the environment does make a difference. So keep that in mind, and also know that each and every one of us have our own biases, and we may not even be aware of those biases. And those sometimes are implicit biases, some things that we're just, because of the way we were raised, the way that we live, that's just how we see the world. So everyone has those to a certain degree. So keep that in mind, because that kind of forms our understanding of directions, of what is expected, those types of things. So always think beyond what your perception is, that others may have different perceptions, and really key into that as well. So if you have any questions about this material, but the takeaway for this is just be very astute, look at everything with that very educated and critical eye, and we are building those skills as we go in this course. So always question things and wonder why. Take care now.